My name is Tennyson Stead, and this is the 8-Sided Blog. Last week, we talked about the traumatic brain injury and all the things that happened after it that have been keeping the 8-Sided Blog from moving forward over the course of the last couple of years. Over the course of my initial conversations with the doctors about what was going to happen here, I came to the understanding that I was probably going to have a stroke at some point over the course of my neurological development. And I've always been somebody who's very engaged by my entertainment community. I've always wanted to help people succeed, and I care a lot about my actors, and I care a lot about my production. So what I decided was that I was going to write down everything I knew about success in entertainment. I'd already been working in film finance for about 10 years. I had this education that made me unlike anybody else in film finance, where I had all this dramaturgical training and acting training, and I'd come from the stage, and I understood the history of entertainment in a way that, frankly, a lot of executives have no idea about. So I wanted to make sure that the connections that I'd made and the facts that I'd zeroed in on about how this industry actually works versus how it's perceived, that they were available to my community, that they were available to my actors. I started writing articles and posting them on Facebook at the time in a series of blogs I called the Developmental Breakdown, and I wrote 200 articles. Over the course of that work, various patterns started to emerge, and probably the most prominent, certainly the most important, is the fact that really success in show business boils down to two very simple factors. Everything we learn in theater, everything we get taught as a tradition on the stage, everything we learn from an agent or a manager that ultimately is going to help us in our career, everything we learn in class, all of it, it all boils down to controlling these two essential things, okay? Because fundamentally, there's only two things that can go wrong with a production. There's a lot of risk factors. If we're going to talk about this as a business, if you've ever looked at the film prospectus of a motion picture, if you've ever looked at the investment materials, what you've seen is a laundry list of what's called risk factors. And it's important to write that because you need to know all the different ways that a film production can disintegrate from underneath you. But really, it comes down to two basic problems. Either the show sucks, which is a problem. If people see a show that sucks, they're not going to want to bring people to it. They're not going to want to share it with other people. Or nobody shows up. And something that's important to understand about the nobody showing up thing is that can happen at any point in the process. It's not just about nobody showing up at the box office. If you've got a set build and nobody shows up, you're in deep shit. For the most part, things are going to work out over time as long as the show is really good and as long as the people are there, okay? So the two things that you need to succeed in show business are strengthen your craft and strengthen your community. All right, we're going to talk about each of these things individually. Strengthen our craft is not just an ethical value, okay? It's something that we have to beat into ourselves through force of habit. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in any particular discipline in cinema. Making sure these things go right is about controlling as many variables as we can, and what that boils down to is basically this all boils down to the fact that 5 out of 7 decisions that we make get made unconsciously, okay? We don't have a lot of immediate in-person control over whether or not we're doing a good job, because the things that we decide and the things that we invest our attention into are only accounting for 2 out of 7 of the decisions that we make. The other 5 are just the decisions that we've made 100 times before, and we're relying essentially on that foundation to make our productions good, right? Our habits are what make our productions good. That person who's super committed to the project in the moment but hasn't necessarily invested in themselves over the course of a career to create a system of habits that support that excellence is not going to do the great job that they want to. What I'm saying is that being excellent in your craft is not about good intentions. It absolutely is not. You have to practice and practice and practice. And ultimately, the more time you invest in all the little details of making a show excellent, whatever your discipline happens to be, the more that stuff is going to happen automatically for you. It's about grinding on yourself and turning yourself into a valuable show person by instilling so many superior habits in yourself that you can't help but do well. And when you start getting to that point, a lot of the things that could make a show fail are going to disintegrate in your presence because you've already taken care of them, because the things that you do without thinking about it are already mitigating those risks. And if you surround yourself by people who are likewise invested in their craft, you can't go wrong. At that point, a show is overwhelmingly likely to be good, okay? Excellence in craft. Excellence in community takes the same level of discipline. It takes the same amount of work. And this is where people get sort of bogged down in ideas like marketing or social media or whatever, okay? The thing that makes people want to support us is not necessarily how many followers we have. It's not. It's not anything other than we are necessary to our community. We have supported other people enough, and we bring so much to the table that people need us around. So when we start doing stuff, and when we start investing in projects, and when we start, prioritizing our own goals and our own ambitions about what to do with this community and what we should be doing for the audience, when we start bringing those things to the table, people support us because they don't want to let us down. They don't want to let us fail. Getting to that point takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of investment in the people around us, okay? And just like with craft, there's a million little habits that we have to build to make that investment work on a day-by-day basis, because there's too much work for us to do consciously. We can't rely on the 2 out of 7 decisions to get all of this work done. We need the other 5 to be helping us along, which means we need to be developing habits when it comes to figuring out who to support. We need to be volunteering on other people's projects, and we need to be smart and ethical about how we volunteer and when we volunteer and how we spend our energy. We need to be unselfish in how we support other filmmakers and how we support the audience. What's more, we need the habits that make that unselfishness productive at all times, because the amount of work that it takes and the amount of investment that it takes in our community to get people to show up for a film that costs $1 million and to make that film profitable is pretty staggering. As we start getting past that budget range and as we start working into higher budgets, it gets even bigger, okay? The bottom line is that when we are so grounded in the habits that make our shows great, that our presence is having a positive impact on the productions around us. And when we are so grounded in the habits that make our community strong, that the other professionals around us are benefiting from our presence in ways that they feel is necessary, that's when our career takes itself to the next level. And even then, we need to develop ourselves into the person who's ready for that next step. We need to develop ourselves into the person who can take that next leap. Any other variable, anything else that somebody is trying to push at you as something that you need to pay attention to in order to succeed in this industry, means they are selling you something. They're trying to convince you that their values are somehow more important than the most basic, fundamental guiding principles of show business. And by the way, it's not a bad thing if somebody wants to sell us something. Sometimes people have useful things for sale, but just be aware that if somebody's trying to convince you that these things are somehow incomplete as a picture of your success, then there's a conflict of interest that you need to be aware of. That's a lot to cover. I think we're in good shape. I think that's the end of this blog. Thank you for joining me. If you like what I have to say, please click the thumbs up. Please click the subscribe button. Make sure that you're here for future updates, and click the little bell so that you get your alerts. And I will see you next week.